Rahman Rahim. Ya Allah, place light in my heart, and on my tongue light, and in my ears light, and in my sight light, and above me light, and below me light, and to my right light, and to my left light, and before me light, and behind me light. Place in my soul light, magnify for me light, and amplify for me light. Make for me light, and make me light. Ya Allah, grant me light, and place light in my nerves, and in my body light, and in my blood light, and in my hair light, and in my skin light. Ya Allah, make for me a light in my grave and a light in my bones. Increase me in light, increase me in light, increase me in light, and grant me light upon light.
في قبري نور واجعلني في بحور نسبح وسط النور وابني لي قصور في الجنة من نور فيها العين.
A sound takes me back to a memory. A wind up and then a melody. As I watch a mechanical ballerina spin, silver box top reflecting jewels and trinkets within. And this is where the tragedy of comparison begins. Tall and slender, perched on a pedestal, sad but proud. As a young girl, I mirrored her as she spun around, perfect, surrounded by ornaments of beauty, valued for their scarcity. See, those stones are treasured because they're rare and unique. But in the features of a woman, are those the same qualities we seek? Or in the pursuit of self-materialization, do we sell our souls for empty idolization? On billboards, the gold standard is swapped for the golden ratio. Fit the mold and appreciation will follow. And this is the way we are wound. Beauty is not found, it is manufactured. Ah, sweet femininity. Ah, days of simplicity, basking in the warm sun, soaking up the adoration of my mom. What will I become? Anything's possible when you're young. Imagining different roles as we'd play dress up, I'd often slip into a certain pair of my mother's shoes, ones with bright sequins in the shape of exotic fruits, waiting for the day that I would measure up, always in such a hurry to grow up. Innocence fading, finger painting quickly replaced by makeup, shading my features, slowly jaded as time passed. I watched my shadow cast beneath me, angry at the sun for being so unflattering. I wanted long nails and a bust. A small waist was a must because the standard of beauty was predetermined in my 17 magazine, automated by the machine, carbon copy beauty queen mannequins pumped out on industrial work lines. Silicone fillers and Botox pumped in to plump up laugh lines. And every goddess started to look the same, furthering the notion that we must tame our individual identity and conform to someone else's idea of normal. Barbie, plastic, nameless, static, confused and uncomfortable in my own skin. All I wanted was to spin, ballerina thin to fit in, to age with dignity and grace, not replace the parts of me that reveal my age. So instead, I learnt to embrace them, and the tragedy of comparison ended there. As a young woman, I grew to love my body for its wabi-sabi, as the Japanese call it, perfect imperfections. And I see myself spinning. For a little girl who won't ever receive a jewelry box from me, I will be the only jewel she sees because I want her to be free to create her own identity. And reflecting that beauty starts with me.
Wow. Good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us on our sixth edition of Arts Canteen and Conversation. I'm delighted this evening to welcome our special and distinguished guest, the multi-talented spoken word artist, the poet, the MC, the presenter, the actress, Dana Dajani. Dana, welcome.
Thank you so much, Aser, for having me. Very excited to be joining you in the Arts Canteen community.
It is our pleasure here to try and make this conversation unsolicited, uncensored, sincere, and honest. And today we are absolutely delighted again to have you on board, Dana. Thank you so much for your time. Let me start the conversation by Amman. This is where you are at the moment. Tell us what is life down there in Amman right now.
Life in Amman has been good, alhamdulillah. It's been a bit challenging, We're all in this lockdown 2.0. We have a nightly curfew, 9 p.m. all the stores shut down, 10 p.m. we have to be at home. And we shut down on the weekend, Thursday night to Saturday morning. And it was a bit challenging for me when I came from London. I had 2 weeks of quarantine. Now that's been reduced to a week, which honestly I think is a lot healthier for people's mental well-being, because to be home for 2 weeks alone and not to see my family after 9 months not being able to see them, it was so tough. But alhamdulillah, now
Sure.
I've come to like our Friday lockdown because it really feels like your day for you. So I enjoy it. I'm trying not to leave
Great.
town on the Friday lockdown. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind our viewers, thank you everyone for joining in this evening, that Dana is on a journey non-stop between Dubai, Amman, and London. So Amman, on this occasion, is her resident for the time being, but surely very soon she will be flying back to London, where she has some interesting projects happening, as I guess. However, I just wanted really tonight to go with the flow and just have this conversation in a completely solicited way, rather than just the boring Q&A. It is a journey that started long time ago for you, Dana, and it was Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, when you finished your art or fine art career long time ago. So tell us a bit more about your student's life.
Yeah, Chicago is where I went to university. I got my BFA in theater with an emphasis in acting. But I would have to say that my obsession with performance started really well before that. Um, Mama really gave me a lot of opportunities to learn. I started reading at 3. I was the annoying kid who read the Kleenex box and the cereal box and whatever was in front of me. So she put me in a room with a cassette player and a book, and it was this series called Hooked on Phonics. And I really think that this is why I got into spoken word and public speaking at the beginning, because I would just read everything. And from there, because I had confidence in reading out loud, I became the narrator in all of the school plays, and decided that I wanted to really pursue theater. But in between that younger age and my college degree, I started high school in Saudi. I lived in Riyadh, And we left actually 1 year into my high school as a freshman because the compound that we lived on was bombed by Al-Qaeda. And the next place that we moved to was Kansas, out of all places.
Was
So
this
from
in Dammam or in Al Khobar? I can't remember.
Riyadh, it was in
Riyadh.
2003. There were 3 compounds in Riyadh that were attacked. And yeah, so we moved to Kansas randomly. And as you can imagine, it was a huge culture shock. And so poetry became my therapy. It became my means to kind of digest and process this really traumatic experience and to help myself heal through that. And it was, angsty teenage poetry, definitely was. And I had a zenga. And it was only later in university where I got to take a solo performance class that I actually started to get the idea that I could put different elements of poetry and theatricality together to kind of create a new form. And I didn't actually do that until well after I graduated from university, and I found myself in Dubai, where there was a very green theater scene. It was very new, and a lot of my colleagues within that scene had full-time jobs. Nobody was trying to pursue the arts full-time like I was. So I realized that we were at various levels of commitment and engagement, and I couldn't always rely on somebody who had a job and a family and other obligations to show up for 6 hours of rehearsal a day and do a long run of a show. Yeah, that's where I kind of brought spoken word into my theatricality so that I could really be a one-woman show.
Yeah, and there is also some elements of music and production in most of your shows, we've noticed in the last few years. So you bring all of these ingredients, if you like, together. But I've noticed that the music is also part of this show. And, you are not fear when it comes to music, to production, to poetry, to spoken word. Even visuals is something that you also include in your shows, and I find this really, really interesting. So all of this multi-talented part of you, Dana, is complementing the shows, I guess, in too many ways. Is this the case?
Yeah, it was always kind of a question of how do you make poetry accessible to people? Because if you ask the average person, they might not have any relationship to poetry. This might be something that they learned, in school because they had to, and it's something that's inaccessible to them. That was the case, at least I can't say it was the case because, in Dubai, there was a really rich poetry scene. There was the poeticians, and then from there evolved different poetry groups, Munch, and then Dubai Poetry Slam, and Rooftop Rhythms in Abu Dhabi. So, but I've always kind of been on a journey of how do I bring myself to this art form. Traditional kind of slam poetry, I found, unfortunately, in the US, it sounds the same. People and because it originated in Philly in the US, the tone and the rhythm and the intonation of the language has now influenced other people who are interested in spoken word, whether they're in Japan or Argentina. So my question was, how do I bring Dana to this form? And that became through theatricality and then through collaborators that I met, like Aaron. We had a band called Type 2 Error. He did really interesting analog electronic music. And then we went
to the producer based in Dubai, yeah?
Yes, he's one of my collaborators. We've released an album actually in 2013, quite a long time ago, but we continued to play live shows until about 2018. And we would have had another one last year if it wasn't for the lockdown situation. It was supposed to be in April at NYU Abu Dhabi.
Yeah,
because I've been really privileged to work with other artists to really bring the poetry to life,
Yeah, it is interesting, this collaborative work that you are doing collectively with too many artists, Dana. And I guess you are uniquely positioned when it comes for all of these collaborations with artists. They are multi-diverse, multilingual, from different backgrounds, different cultures. And this perhaps is enriching your shows in too many ways. And what I've noticed also, you switching on between Arabic and English. Do you interact with the audience, or do you sense that this moment I really wanted to improvise, or I just gonna switch off between English or Arabic? How do you work this process?
Well, predominantly I write poetry in English because this was the language that I was educated in, and actually there was a time in my life where I spoke Spanish better than I spoke Arabic, surprisingly, because I continued to be educated in the U.S. and have outlets to learn Spanish at a high level. And it was not until I got back to Dubai that I started to really, it was very important to me to be able to write and perform bil Arabi. So MCing, I've done bil Arabi, a lot more acting in terms of I'll get a script, whether it was a series on NBC or short films. I've presented bil Arabi, but my own poetry is predominantly bil English,
It's
and
in
since
English.
since that's the case, there have been some shows where I like to engage with my audience on the in between in Arabic, because I know that, particularly in London, some of the shows that I've done, it drew in a lot of Arab audiences, so that I get a balance of both.
That's interesting. Thank you very much for the answer. Okay, great. So I know now you are stuck in Amman for hopefully a very short period of time before you go back to your normal travels and movement. But what is an average day like for you now in Amman, Dana?
I don't know that there's an average day. Every day
It's
comes
different.
with its own rhythm. And as a freelancer, I found that predominantly to be the case. There are some times where I have clients, whether I know that I have a project that I'm working on, it's a commission and I have to create something, or I know that there's a show coming up and I really want to prepare a new set and I want to work with a new musician, for example, to bring that set to life in a way that my audience hasn't seen yet from me, because I always want to keep the poems fresh. If I have something going on, I definitely carve out time for that. But if I don't, I find that the best way for me to be inspired and to be creative is to first make sure that Dana the human is really comfortable and taken care of. So I like to cook. I am a neat freak. I need to make sure the house is organized before I can sit down to write, because otherwise there's so much distraction in the way of distraction.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I like to spend time with friends and family, but then once I've ticked all of those boxes, then I feel okay taking 3 or 4 days where I'm not going to answer the phone. I'm just going to dive into my work. And a big part of that process is for me to also kind of consume what's out there. I read, I watch different things, and I reflect on how I feel about those things. And then I turn to the page with those emotions and start to express in different forms. There's always a need to maintain the inspiration so that I can sit down comfortably to write.
yeah. Privately, earlier we had a little bit of a chat before we went live, and you told me that one of the events you've curated in Amman was a small gathering of the family in the Diwan, W-I, Diwan, and the Diwan here is like the place where all the Dajani family members would gather in the evening and perhaps socialize or cook a meal or maybe sort an issue with the family, internal issues, whatever. What was this experience like to be in the Diwan in Amman? It must be very thrilling, very intimate as well, and also it's an indication of you belonging to this big family, I guess, in Amman.
Yeah, it was really a privilege to join them. And Dana Dajani does such an amazing job really calling for and pulling the family together. So she invited me to come and present an evening of my poetry, to introduce myself to the extended family, because as some people may know, the Dajani family is a very big family. And so we don't always know who's beyond our immediate family. And it was incredible to be there. There were at least 3 generations that were there, so I got to meet people from all ages, and it's really important for me to be connected also to elders, to the elders
Yeah,
within my community, and to share that work with them, and to also download the stories from them so that I can pass it on through the poetry to the younger generation. It was a
that's really
beautiful.
great. That's great. I'm gonna take one question that has been uploaded here on my screen from Martina. So Dana is very versatile. Can you see the question? Artist which
Mhm.
is from the arts is the most important for you? Theater, poetry, or music?
Ah, thank you, Martina, for that question. I guess I would have to say, because my background was in the theater, I find that this form is the most inclusive, because within a theatrical performance, you can include poetry, you can include prose, you can include music, you can include dance and gesture and choreography. So the theater, to me, I mean, it's always where I will pay my homage. Even I prefer to film acting 110%, because something happens in the theater. There becomes this like exchange of energy between the audience and the performers. And there's actually been studies that have been done about the heartbeats of audience members synchronize in the theater during a performance. And I find that to be so beautiful. And I can tell you, on stage, I can feel it. I can feel it when we're all together, and I can feel it when we're not. And also the idea that, no matter what happens, the show must go on. Theater is like ritual in that way, because you do it again and again and again and again. And yet every time is different. And sometimes you have new discoveries in a show that you've been doing 30 times. And on day 31, you're like, oh, it makes sense. It landed in a different way. And the realization happens on stage, and everyone can feel it. I will always love theater.
So that's a great answer to Martina. Thank you so much, Dana. I guess everyone has missed the live performance, missed the theater, missed the stage, and missed the connection and the harmony of all of these, atmospheric gatherings, if you like, and the human touch as well between arts practitioners, artists, curators, and the general public. This is what really we are looking forward to see, hopefully after vaccine is in place next spring, if everything goes according to the plan. Meanwhile, in Amman, go back to the Diwan where you had this performance with the family. I guess one of the things I picked up on, Dana, is the memories of the family members. And I do remember reading one of your essays before you went and performed it live. Was this inspiring story and the relationship between you and your grandmother, and the stories that you inherited from her, and then you went to perform those stories from your grandmother with some belongings of her, such as textiles, clothes, fashionable items, objects that they were part also of the stage. There must be something really magical about this relationship between you and your grandmother. And may I ask, how old is she now?
She's in her 80s. She's very particular about me disclosing her age, so I'll just leave it at that. She's in her
Sure.
80s. Yeah.
So
Uh,
this story went and was performed, and it was part of your show, and
mhm.
you managed to have a permission to take all of these pieces and being hanged as part of the show. Was this
Mhm.
a difficult process for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a process that I unraveled over the course of years. I would say I started this process in 2012, when every time that I visited her, I would record her stories. So I started to transcribe them and just audio record them because I wanted to make sure that they were preserved. And every now and then, as I would be writing down her stories, she'd say, you know, هذا صورناه, we filmed this. And I was always so confused, like, what do you mean you filmed it? She said, we have it on video. Video? Video didn't exist then. What do you mean video? And I kept asking her and asking her, Teta, give me the videos. Let me see what you have. What do you mean? And a few years ago, she gave me 60 reels of 8 millimeter film taken from 71 to 83. When they left Palestine, they left Palestine in 1967. And because my grandfather, rest his soul, he worked for Air India at the time when they lived in Palestine, and he spoke Hindi actually, among
Wow.
other languages. But he used to travel around the world, and I would have to say, before they left in '67, he had this job, and they were traveling, and Teta was already a mother of two, and you know, Jidda asked her, my grandfather Jidda asked her what she wanted to do with herself. You know, what do you want to do with your life? She said, why don't I travel with you and buy dresses from around the world and open up a boutique in Jerusalem and sell them here. So they had a boutique in Jerusalem called Petit Paris. And when I went in 2013 to Jerusalem, I met a girl my age who bought her prom dress from Petit Paris. So even after they left, the store remained around for quite some time. I don't think it's open anymore, but it was for quite some time, decades after. But so they left in '67 and they still continued to travel around the world. Obviously, they couldn't take so many of their belongings. So almost everything that they had of their life before 1967 is lost to us. I don't get to see anything of that, not books, not photos, not very much at all. But they lived this really strange alternative refugee narrative because of, you know, by virtue of Jidda's job. They were traveling around the world for free. They were staying in really beautiful hotels. They got to go on many tours of all of these
They were
countries.
very
And
privileged in that sense.
yeah, in fact, she called them the poor millionaires. This is how she refers to them in that era. But those reels of film come from that time. And so I got to see some of their travels. And it includes Hawaii and Brazil all the way to Sri Lanka and everything in between. And so we're talking about flora, fauna, architecture, as well as your typical, you know, funny family home video stuff. But that was
Yeah.
an amazing archive.
So all of these treasures are kept with you now, and I guess probably at some point you're gonna be able to document all of these fascinating videos and clips into, I don't know, maybe a documentary or a film or a production of your own, I guess, Dana, right?
Yeah, so you mentioned that I got the chance to perform it in the summer of 2019. I was invited to be the artist in residence at the Liverpool Arab Arts Festival, and they asked me to present the first incarnation of this performance. And so
So that
I
was work
went.
in progress, right? So we can explain to the audience.
Yeah, it was a work in progress. It was my first iteration after all of these years of archiving and documenting. And I also need to mention that just a few summers ago, she gave me almost, you know, four suitcases of dresses. So they're hundreds of dresses from all over the world, not from Palestine, but from her travels all over the world. And I was so surprised when I got these dresses because it's not like they're one style. It's not like, oh, that's her style. Each one was her own character, was her own persona. And I found myself asking, how can one woman pull off all of these dresses? You know, they're all so
Yes.
unique. And so the play that I presented, the one woman show that I presented, was a mix of these dresses, unpacking literally one of her old suitcases, unpacking the dresses, hanging them, and talking about identity and belonging and inheritance. And what are the things that we do inherit? For example, I got all these dresses, but I couldn't inherit Palestinian nationality, for example, from my grandparents. And so, yeah, I do hope to make it into a documentary film one day.
We have, Dana, we have a comment from someone from Haifa in Palestine. Beautiful stories you are sharing with us. Thank you so much, Dana. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for whoever wrote this nice comment here on the screen. So I was wondering if we can ask you for a small reading now as well in between this conversation. Do you mind?
Yeah,
Can you read us
actually,
something new?
I will. I will read you a new piece that I've been writing, and I wrote this during the first lockdown. And, you know, I found in that time I was so inundated by all of the news coverage of Corona. And so I got the idea that I want to make a poem just out of this jargon, this news media jargon of the lockdown. So it's an alphabet poem, and I call it the ABCs of COVID-19. And this is a sneak peek because we're going to be releasing a video hopefully by the end of the year. So stay tuned for that. But I'll share the poem with you. If I don't break my printer. Okay. Activists argue against authorities. Allow us access, adapt antibodies. Automation alleviates our agency. Ambulance advancement. All in. Borders blockaded, bid bad for business, bankrupt, bailout, billionaires broadcast, bad luck breathing, breaking news, corona, contagion, confused, cytokine storm, conflicting views, capitalism, contamination, cure, competition for commodities, careless consumption, civil liberties, common good collaboration, community, condolences, civic duty. Domestic depression, devastating disease, downfall, decay, do not resuscitate, dignity. Deliberate, death toll, domino, environmental emergency eased as we expose the end times, ethics of our exponential explosion. Epidemic of economics, essentials, evolution. Energy and efforts to elevate, fear, fight for our lives, final frontier, future, famine, freedom, fake news, factories forced to close, flatten the curve, funeral homes. Gaia, gasping, green, gains against Goliath growth economy, 5G global crises, global passport, gates, goals, glued to the phone, hospitals, healthcare, home. Hesitation, hysteria, heal, herd immunity, helpless, hellish, hegemony. Immunocompromised intentions, interspecies influenza, infection, ICU beds, ice rinks, incapable industry. Imprisoned inside, juxtaposed inequalities, jobless, justification, justice, journey inwards, just in case, karma, key workers, kindness, keep a distance. Lockdown laid off legislation, lives, lungs, luxury, life support labor class, laboratories, masks, medical, military missions, manipulation, modern medicine, malady machine, morals of the meritocracy, myth, mass meditation, normal again, neighbors, negligence, Netflix nightly, opportunity out of stock, oil prices drop, online parties, power to the people as they persist in this public-private panic, panopticon of the privileged, prophecies of profit, post-planetary pandemic, pay off the population, principle, police, quarantine, question, questing, rest in peace, respirators rise up, revelation, renewal, reconstruct, reopen, rhetoric, risk, resistance, rite of passage, surrender, system collapse, stay home, survive, shelter in place, stock market stimulus, sanitize, stay inside, separated solidarity, save lives, social distancing, Soon. Sorry. Toilet paper trauma, totalitarian, trapped truth, tick-tock, transmission, tragedy, thank you. Together we'll transition through these unprecedented times, uninsured, under threat, unprepared, ultimatum. Universal basic income? The unbelievable. Virus, ventilators, vulnerable. Viral, vaccine, virtual reality, each in a vacuum, and what of our values? 2-meter vicinity, vindicate a vocabulary of victory. Warning, wet markets. We will meet soon. Wealth, welfare state, xenophobia, Xanadu, the young, you, and Zoom.
Very powerful. Thank you so much, Dana. That's great. Thank you so much. Very inspiring. We've got a question here from Elena, and she said, when I saw a film of your performing a poem, I was reminded of the very powerful slam poetry that I discovered in Paris. Then she goes on and asks, do you know about the art of slam, and do you identify yourself with that genre?
Well, we mentioned a little bit earlier, Elena. I'm not sure if you caught it earlier, but I'm definitely influenced and inspired by the art of slam poetry. And actually, one of my first introductions into this art form was Saul Williams. I got to see him live when I was in Kansas, and I read his books, She and Said the Shotgun to the Head. And so I was very much inspired by this genre. But as I started to see what was coming through and what was really shared of the genre, I realized that it all sounded really homogenous, it all sounded quite the same. So I started to look at ways that I could break things up and do something that's a bit more theatrical. Not sure if you can hear this.
He doesn't know how to do that. He has, you picked the wrong guy, the wrong night at the wrong time.
Yeah, these are a few clips from Dana's recent, is it? The one before? Yeah, it was from a recent performance.
Yeah, all of these were actually made in lockdown.
And in both London and Amman.
All of them were made in London, actually, so far. And the last one now for ABCs of COVID will be filmed in Amman. But I've been working, really, really fortunate to be working with my partner, Dami Anso, who's a Lebanese Slovak visual artist and graphic animator. And now filmmaker, bless him. He never picked up a camera before. I was like, Rami, here you go.
That's great. Well, thank you very much on behalf of all of us, Rami. That's a great shot. Thank you so much for sharing, Aaron. I was also asking earlier in private conversation, Dana, about, your performance and all of this incredible collaboration that you have managed to do in the last few years. I was wondering if there is any message hidden or if there is any theme that you wanted to deliver through these collaborations with people, whether they are venues or artists. If there is any message that you wanted really to deliver through this process?
Yes, well, I believe that, art without politics is just decoration. And so I really like to infuse my poems with a theme. It helps me, I guess not, it helps me process my anger, my passion, my sadness, my grief about the state of the world. So I feel like poetry becomes my channel for all of these emotions. So a lot of my poems have social justice themes, whether that's, justice for Palestine, whether that's the industrialization of beauty, which is the first poem that I shared in our opening, Or, for example, for me, the ABCs of COVID-19, that's about, where is the conversation? I don't see it as a conversation that we're being engaged in about how we feel about the state of the world, or how we can make the world better. We're being inundated with all of this kind of vocabulary. And this one is made in remembrance of the revolution in Lebanon. And also the question in this is, what of the army of peace? Because all of these nonviolent movements that we saw 1 year ago, year and a half ago, there were revolutions happening around the world, from the US to Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, to Haiti, to Lebanon, to Baghdad. And they're non-violent, they're peaceful protests. They're people really coming out in the streets to say, we want to be heard, we want to be engaged, we don't feel represented by our governments. And yet, we're still not engaged. And what happens more often than not is that there's a violent force that suppresses this non-violent protest. And my question is, for how long? If this is always the case, and what are our tools to kind of resist if you can't really fight violence with non-violence, or can you? So this is the question that I posed in this one, but I try and always infuse a theme.
Yeah. In one of the interviews for a magazine in Dubai, the commentators ask you about your charitable work for events, and it seems to me like you are very much motivated by this kind of events when you know that the event is for a cause and it's for non-profit, and you immediately stood up and say, yeah, I'm gonna take a part in this charity event because it motivates you and you feel the need to be part of this collective in that case, and there is also a moral responsibilities, as you said in the interview, to be part of that action. And this, activism in you, if I may use this terminology, is part of the process, I guess, that you want to express yourself with all of these events in a completely different way, rather than just your orthodox and average kind of events with a performer who goes on the stage and people just bought tickets to come and, being entertained. I guess this is something in you that stands, because in that statement with that journalist, you said, I do a bit of everything. Mm-hmm. What would you say, Dana, to this?
I count my blessings. Alhamdulillah, I've been very privileged in life, not only in first of all, in my safety and security in getting out of Riyadh after the bombing, but then in my ability to, against many odds, pursue my passion. And I know I'm blessed. I live a life of privilege. I've been able to travel and see the world. And so I don't take these privileges without responsibility. I think that it's very important, at least for me. I know that my individual happiness is tied to my ability to contribute my individual talents and efforts towards the benefit of a collective. It doesn't make me feel good to just indulge myself. Not that I don't, because I know that to be able to give, I have to take care of myself. And then I also know that I want to give to those around me. But eventually I want to have so much that I am okay giving more and more and more. And so I find a lot of purpose and direction in supporting NGOs and other charities. And in the past, I've worked with MAP, Medical Aid for Palestinians, and I've worked with Surge for Water, and I've worked with Clowns Who Care, and I've worked with a whole list of various charities, Welfare Association for Youth, and on and on. And it's a chance also to inspire other people who are there and doing the work that, we need to collectively support each other. So I feel like a responsibility.
And these countless projects and performances has led to you to be among few actually Emirati award-winning artists and women who been carving a name for themselves, and you stood as one of the 50 influential women in the United Arab Emirates, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago. So these processes, as well with the award winning, has it opened doors for you? Was this a step forward for your career, your journey as a performer, as a spoken word artist?
Yeah, definitely. It's always an honor to be seen and to be recognized within the community for the work that I do. So I take that with so much pride, actually, because I don't do the work for the recognition, but when the recognition comes, it's always like a very strong affirmation that I can continue on my path, and that, you can't really hold an account of like, oh, I did this and nobody said anything. You just have to keep doing what you're doing, and eventually the right people will see you. And I can't really talk about it right now because I've signed an NDA and it's not really out yet. But there's
Sure.
a very big project that was a very well-known international global composer saw my work online and asked me to come on board and to write
Great.
the lyrics for his new music. So that's why I do what I do, and I know that
And
the
there is
people
no
who,
way back for you, Dana. That's it. There is no way back now. You are on the right track, I guess.
inshallah, yeah, I hope so.
We just wanted this pandemic to be over, and then you're gonna go back to your activities as hopefully as soon as next spring, I hope.
Yeah, me too. There's actually potentially a show that I'll be doing in London either late Feb or early March. Inshallah, we're just waiting for the date to be confirmed. So I'll be back in
That's
the UK
great.
soon.
That's great. One more thing I would like to mention to our viewers and distinguished guests is, if there is any more questions for Dana, please feel free to send over, and my colleagues will be able to share with us as well before we close this session in the next 15 minutes or so. So Dana, back to Amman. I mean, would this be a time of reflection, as I assumed it was, and very intense when it comes to production, maybe? Although it's all virtual, but I guess you just need to be on the top of things and look into some alternatives way of expressing yourselves. I guess you've been very creative in that sense.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I don't know how much of this I could have done without Rami, and as my creative partner and partner in all things great. We really got to put attention into increasing the quality and production value of my videos, because I was so busy for so long going from live performance to live performance, which is what I live for, and that connection there is very rewarding for me. But I couldn't, when somebody films that, you in a big stage with one light, I know that in the energy, I can feel the energy of the room, but on camera, it doesn't quite translate. And so now we really got the chance to give it the visual, to give it the music, to give it a bit of a body, to present the poetry through. So you can check out more on my YouTube channel, and
Yeah.
there will be another video for ABCs of COVID coming out in December, and another video coming out, which is a crazy animation done by Rami. That'll be coming out in January. It's called Caged
We
Bird.
can't wait to see it, definitely. Yeah, that's great. So while we are here having this very intimate and honest conversation, I would like to ask my colleague Aaron, I think, because people are asking how can they follow you and where they can find your website and all of this stuff. So my colleague here, Aaron, will be able to share some of your website and social media platform for people to see and to share and to be able to follow all of your activities and events, and to find out more about Dana Dajani. That's absolutely fantastic. So I'm grateful. And if you want to just to direct people also, Dana, to where to go on in terms of, is there is any SoundCloud links or anything?
So everything everywhere is danadajani.poetry or Dana Dajani Poetry. So my YouTube is just Dana Dajani Poetry, and everything else is danadajani.poetry. My website is danadajani.com. Do check it out. Do get in touch. I really love to know what the poetry makes people see, feel, think. And so I'm missing that kind of engagement after live shows from online. And so do reach out, and I will definitely keep in touch with you.
So yeah, this is what really we are looking forward to see more of Dana's interesting and fascinating work, and hopefully we will be get together very soon. In February, you said you'll be back on the stage in London. Fingers crossed. I mean, this is very optimistic, but hopefully, we will be able to be there and support you and be part of these interesting events. The last question for you, Dana, tonight is, what is the plans for the next of the year? What time looks like in the next few weeks to the end of the year?
End of the year is finishing up the video for ABCs, which we want to film, with the templates, the news templates. And actually, I'm going to perform it as many different kind of caricatures from what you see on the news. It's not going to be one voice. I'll be like an old man and a woman. And you know how sometimes you see Fox News, she's like all legs and big jewelry. Yeah. Why is she wearing a miniskirt saying the news? I don't know. But just to do them in different characters, because I want to play up on the farce, on the comedy, the comedic nature. And I'm also working with the two collaborators of mine and longtime friends, Sara and Marwan. And we're going to be launching the Spiral Sessions, which is an online talking circle format for us to really be able to engage in conversation about certain topics that we don't always have space for in our day-to-day life. So stay tuned for that also. That's
great. Also, we're gonna hopefully be working on something for next year edition of Arab Women Artists Now, Awan Festival in London and online as well, and take the opportunities of your expertise in running workshops for festivals, etc., etc. But lastly, I want you to tell us what is your favorite dish, given that you are stuck now in the lockdown in Amman. I know you love cooking anyway.
I really do love cooking. I'm a vegetarian, so before I was a vegetarian, it's been 10 years now, my favorite dish was Msakhan, hands down, which is a Palestinian dish of bread and onions and summa and chicken. Now, as a vegetarian, I would have to say fattet betinjan, which is grilled eggplant, yogurt with lots of garlic, and fried bread on top, and some coriander to garnish. So fattet betinjan for the win. Any day.
Great. Bon appetit, Dana. Thank you so much for a beautiful evening and for your time. And also, I would like to thank all my colleagues in the back scene, Aaron and Ribal, for making this possible. And thank you, everyone who has been watching this 6th episode of Arts Canteen in Conversation. Please keep an eye on Dana's website and her future projects and events. And looking forward to welcome you all again to Arts Canteen Conversation. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Good. Allah. Take care. Good night.
Bye.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya Allah, place light in my heart, and on my tongue light, and in my ears light, and in my sight light, and above me light, and below me light. To my right, light, and to my left, light, and before me, light, and behind me,